The sun was high in the sky, beating down on the dry, dusty plains of Arizona. The land stretched endlessly, dotted with jagged rocks and sparse scrub brush, where the wind whispered through the canyons and carried the faint scent of sage and dust. Cole Bennett rode his horse slowly, boots in the stirrups and hand resting lightly on the reins. He had been on the trail since sunrise, following the edges of his cattle herd that had wandered too close to the cliffs. The morning had been quiet, almost too quiet, and Cole couldn't shake the uneasy feeling that had settled in his chest. He had spent most of his life on these plains, and instinct had taught him that silence in the desert was never empty. As he rode deeper into a narrow canyon, his horse's hooves stirring the dust, Cole's eyes caught a movement on the ridgeline above. At first he thought it might be a hawk circling in the sky or a tumbleweed rolling past. But then he saw it clearly, a figure on horseback riding with a speed and purpose that immediately set Cole on edge. The rider wore something unusual, a mask that covered the face and what looked like a metal helmet catching the sunlight. Cole squinted, trying to make out details, but the figure was too far up the cliff, moving with confidence and control that seemed almost unnatural. Cole shifted in the saddle, gripping the reins tighter, and signaled his horse to slow. He had faced many dangers before, but something about this rider was different. The air felt tense, charged, and his heart began to beat a little faster. He remembered the stories older cowboys used to tell, tales of warriors who roamed the canyons, people who moved like shadows and struck with precision. He had always dismissed them as legends, but now he felt that legend was real, and it was riding toward him. The masked rider descended from the ridge, and Cole could see the glint of a bow at the figure's side, the curve of the weapon sharp and ready. Arrows were not uncommon in these parts, but a skilled rider wielding one was dangerous. Cole's hand brushed the handle of his revolver, and he flexed his fingers. He had never been afraid to defend himself, but fear was creeping in, the kind that made every small sound echo in your mind. He had to stay calm. He had to assess the situation. The rider slowed as they approached, and Cole noticed that the horse beneath the figure was lean and strong, its movements precise and controlled. Dust rose in a small cloud around the hooves, shimmering in the hot sunlight. The rider's eyes were hidden behind the mask, but Cole felt them studying him, weighing him like a prey animal that might fight or flee. Cole knew that hesitation could be dangerous, but so could rushing in blindly. He kept his horse steady, leaning slightly forward in the saddle, ready for whatever came next. The two of them circled each other, a careful dance on the dry, uneven ground. Cole could feel the sweat starting to bead on his forehead and his jaw tightened. He had faced bandits before, but this was not a bandit. This was someone trained, someone dangerous, someone who seemed to move with a skill that was almost unnatural. Every small movement of the rider was deliberate, precise, and Cole realized that the fight would be unlike any he had faced before. For a moment, the canyon was silent except for the sound of hooves and the whisper of the wind. The masked rider made the first move, drawing an arrow from the quiver on their back and nocking it carefully. Cole's eyes tracked the motion, and his hand hovered over the revolver. He had to think fast. He couldn't afford to make the first mistake. He had faced danger before, but the instinct that had kept him alive in countless scrapes told him that this was different. This was not just a test of strength. This was a test of wits, courage, and patience. Cole slowly circled his horse, keeping his eyes fixed on the masked figure. Every small movement counted, and he was aware of the uneven ground beneath the horse's hooves, the shifting dust, the tiny rocks that could send the animal off balance. He needed to stay steady. He needed to be ready. His mind raced through strategies, weighing each against the figure's obvious skill. The rider's movements were smooth, almost fluid, and Cole felt the tension build in his chest. He had faced many dangerous situations, but there was something primal about this moment, something that made his blood run hot and cold at the same time. The sun was merciless, and the heat radiated off the rocks, making the air shimmer. Cole felt it on his skin, on his arms, as sweat ran down the back of his neck. The horse snorted, shifting nervously under him, sensing the tension in the air. Cole patted the animal gently, whispering for it to stay calm. He knew he needed to remain composed no matter what came next. He had spent years riding these lands, and experience had taught him that panic could be as deadly as any weapon. The masked rider shifted in the saddle, drawing another arrow and testing the wind. Cole noticed the subtle adjustments in the figure's posture, the way the shoulders moved, the tension in the arms. Every detail mattered. He took a deep breath, letting the hot air fill his lungs, and tried to read the movements, looking for a hint, a sign, any weakness. But there was none. The figure was a mirror of skill, precise, patient, and deadly. Cole realized that he was not just facing an opponent. He was facing a master of strategy, someone who understood the land, the wind, the horses, and the moment in a way that made him cautious. Suddenly, the rider made a move, a quick shift to the left, and Cole had to respond instantly. He urged his horse forward, the animal's hooves kicking up clouds of dust. The arrow flew past, and Cole felt the wind of it brush against him. His heart raced, adrenaline surging through his veins. The duel had begun. Every instinct he had ever honed was now in play. He had to stay calm, stay alert, and stay alive. The two of them moved across the canyon floor like predators, circling, testing, striking, and retreating. Cole felt the sun burning his neck, the dust clogging his throat, and yet he could not afford to falter. The rider was relentless, moving with a grace and precision that left no room for error. Cole countered with careful movements of his own, using every ounce of experience, every trick he had learned from years of riding and fighting in the wild plains. Time seemed to stretch. Seconds felt like minutes as the duel continued. The rider's eyes never wavered, and Cole felt a strange respect building alongside the fear. This was no ordinary fight. This was a battle of wills, skill, and survival. Each small advantage had to be earned, and the canyon seemed to close around them, the rocks echoing the sounds of hooves and the rustle of gear. Cole's muscles ached, his mind strained, and yet he could not let the intensity falter. He had to match the rider move for move, arrow for arrow, thought for thought. The air was thick with dust and tension. Cole's horse snorted, shifting its weight as another arrow whistled past. The sound was sharp, piercing, and Cole's ears rang for a moment. He felt the sweat running down his face, the dust in his eyes, and yet he could not stop. He had to stay focused. He had to understand this opponent, anticipate the next move, and survive. This was more than a fight. This was a test of everything he had learned in his life on these lands. As the sun climbed higher, casting harsh shadows across the canyon floor, Cole realized something. This masked rider was not just skilled, they were fearless, precise, and determined. And Cole understood deep in his bones that the fight was far from over. Every movement counted, every second mattered, and the desert around them became a stage for a battle that neither could afford to lose. Cole tightened his grip on the reins, adjusting his stance in the saddle. He felt the horse respond beneath him, muscles coiling and stretching with readiness. The rider opposite him made a subtle signal, and Cole recognized it as a challenge, a test of courage. He met it with steady eyes, heart pounding, knowing that this encounter would mark him, shape him, and perhaps change him forever. The canyon held its breath. The wind slowed, the dust settled for a moment, and two figures faced each other. One a seasoned cowboy who knew these lands like the back of his hand, the other a mysterious masked warrior whose intentions were yet unknown. Cole felt the weight of history, of the plains, of the countless confrontations that had come before and the lessons they carried. He braced himself for what would come next, unaware that this encounter was only the beginning of a story that would test not only his strength and skill, but his understanding of courage, respect, and the unexpected humanity hidden beneath a mask. Cole's heart pounded as he and the masked rider faced each other across the canyon floor. The tension between them was thick, almost visible in the heat-hazed air. Both horses shifted nervously, sensing the intensity of the moment. Cole tightened his grip on the reins and adjusted his stance, muscles coiled and ready. He knew the fight was about to escalate, and he had to stay alert, moving with precision and patience. The rider's movements were smooth and deliberate, each shift in position a challenge, a question that Cole had to answer. Without warning, the masked rider pulled back an arrow, knocking it with practiced ease. Cole felt the sharp wind of its release whistle past his ear and instinctively ducked, letting the arrow pass over his shoulder. He urged his horse forward, moving in a careful circle to keep the rider in his sights while trying to stay out of reach. The ground beneath them was rough and uneven, and every hoofbeat sent small stones skittering across the canyon floor. Cole's mind raced, calculating distances, predicting the opponent's next move. He had faced danger before, but never someone who seemed to anticipate every action he took. The masked rider was quick, striking from angles Cole did not expect. An arrow flew, grazing the tip of Cole's hat, and he felt the sting of near contact. He reined his horse sharply to the side, kicking up a cloud of dust as he countered, trying to gain higher ground. The rider followed without hesitation, leaping and twisting on horseback with remarkable agility. Cole's eyes widened in surprise, admiration, and caution. This was no ordinary opponent. The precision, strength, and speed were beyond what he had ever encountered in the desert. Cole drew his revolver, careful not to spook his horse, and kept his focus on the rider. He knew a single misstep could be disastrous. He fired a shot toward the ground in front of the rider, forcing the figure to adjust the course slightly. It was a small victory, but enough to keep him in the game. He could feel the adrenaline surging through him, sharp and thrilling, making every muscle tense with readiness. The rider responded with a swift movement, twisting the bow in hand and firing another arrow. Cole ducked low in the saddle, feeling the wind from the arrow brush past his cheek. His heart skipped a beat, and he urged his horse to pivot, creating more space between them. The duel continued, a dangerous dance that wove across the canyon floor, around boulders, and past jagged rocks. Dust filled the air, catching the harsh sunlight and making the world seem almost unreal. Cole's mind worked faster than ever, analyzing every movement, every shift in posture, every subtle hint that could give away the rider's intention. The masked figure was relentless, maintaining perfect control of both horse and weapon. Cole's respect for the rider grew even as the danger increased. He realized that this was more than a fight. It was a test of skill, endurance, and courage. Cole's horse shied slightly as another arrow flew past, grazing a boulder nearby. He patted the animal's neck, whispering commands to keep it calm, and forced himself to breathe steadily. Fear was a constant companion, but he could not let it control him. Every second counted, every decision mattered. The masked rider adjusted, circling him, searching for a weakness while Cole countered with careful, precise movements. The tension built with each passing moment, and it became clear that neither of them would give up easily. The masked rider suddenly charged, closing the distance with speed that made Cole's pulse quicken. He leaned forward, gripping the reins tightly, and prepared to react. The rider fired an arrow, but Cole's quick reflexes allowed him to duck and roll the horse to the side, narrowly avoiding contact. He fired a warning shot toward the rider's path, forcing a split-second pause which gave him just enough time to reposition. The desert echoed with the sounds of hooves, gunfire, and the hiss of arrows flying by. Each sound sharpened Cole's senses, making him acutely aware of the danger surrounding him. Cole tried to anticipate the rider's next move, watching the way the masked figure shifted weight, adjusted posture, and read the terrain. The arrows came fast now, forcing him to make split-second decisions. He ducked, twisted, and urged his horse into sudden bursts of speed. Every time he moved, the rider adjusted, countering with unmatched precision. Cole felt the adrenaline hit a new high. Every nerve in his body on edge, every thought concentrated on survival and strategy. The canyon seemed alive, echoing with the movements of two skilled warriors locked in a battle of wits and reflexes. The rider shifted tactics, using the terrain to advantage. They ducked behind rocks, leapt from small ridges, and fired arrows with deadly accuracy. Cole adapted quickly, using his knowledge of the land to predict where the next arrow might come from. He moved with calculated caution, keeping one eye on the rider and the other scanning for opportunities to gain the upper hand. The dance of attack and counterattack continued, both of them pushing themselves and their horses to the limits. As the duel intensified, Cole felt exhaustion creeping in. His muscles burned and sweat stung his eyes, but he refused to slow. He had faced difficult challenges before, but the combination of speed, skill, and unpredictability in this opponent tested every instinct he had. He relied on experience, intuition, and patience, waiting for the smallest opening, the slightest misstep. But the masked rider remained flawless, moving with a rhythm that made it seem as though they were one with the land. At one point, Cole managed to close the distance slightly, surprising the rider with a sudden maneuver. The figure twisted in the saddle, deflecting the advantage with a swift motion, and continued the relentless assault. Cole's mind raced, searching for a strategy that could give him a real edge. He knew brute force would not win this fight. It required observation, timing, and courage, the kind of courage that pushed a person to act even when fear threatened to paralyze. The sun beat down mercilessly, and the heat rose in waves from the rocks, making the air shimmer. Dust clung to their clothes, their faces streaked with sweat and grit. Cole's throat was dry, his vision blurred slightly from the heat, yet he remained focused. Every arrow, every movement, every breath counted. He could sense the rhythm of the rider, feel it in the movement of the horse, the tilt of the head, the tension in the arms. He had to act in perfect harmony with his instincts and the environment. Cole noticed a brief pause in the rider's attack, a momentary shift that could be exploited. He urged his horse forward with sudden speed, trying to close the distance and force a direct confrontation. The rider responded instantly, spinning the horse and releasing an arrow aimed to intercept Cole's approach. Cole ducked low, feeling the arrow's wind brush his shoulder, and pressed forward, determined to gain control of the situation. The clash of skill and strategy reached a fever pitch. Each move countered with equal force. Time seemed suspended as the two figures moved across the canyon like shadows, each one testing the other, each one unwilling to yield. Cole's mind was a whirlwind of calculations, instincts, and reactions, but beneath it all, a sense of awe began to take hold. The masked rider's skill was extraordinary, a reminder of the untamed power and beauty of the land. Cole had always respected the desert and its dangers, but this encounter brought that respect into sharp focus, mingled with fear and admiration. The duel stretched on, with neither giving ground. Cole's revolver stayed ready, but he relied as much on his horse, his knowledge of the terrain, and his own agility. Arrows flew with precise intent, dust and sunlight creating a swirling haze around them. The rider moved like a shadow, disappearing behind rocks only to reappear moments later in a new position. Bow raised and ready, Cole matched each action, learning, adapting, and pushing himself beyond limits he hadn't known he possessed. At one point, Cole managed to force the rider into a brief pause, pressing his advantage just enough to test the figure's reaction. The masked rider hesitated for a heartbeat, enough for Cole to see a glimmer of something unexpected, a flicker of recognition, a hesitation that was uncharacteristic. The moment passed as quickly as it came, and the duel continued with relentless energy. Cole felt a strange mix of frustration and respect, knowing that this fight would not end until one of them found the perfect opportunity. Exhaustion and adrenaline fought within Cole, but he refused to surrender to either. His muscles ached, his mouth was dry, and the sun seemed to weigh heavier with every passing minute. Yet his mind was sharper than ever, eyes scanning for patterns, movements, weaknesses, and chances. The masked rider remained a formidable opponent, moving with a precision that left no room for error. Cole understood that this encounter was not just physical. It was a battle of wits, timing, and courage. It was a duel that demanded everything he had to give. As the sun moved toward its zenith, Cole knew the fight was far from over. He felt the weight of every decision, every movement, and the responsibility to stay alive. The masked rider was relentless, skillful, and fearless. Cole's respect for the figure grew, even as the danger escalated. Each second brought new challenges, new tests of skill and resolve, and Cole realized that this was a fight unlike any other he had faced. Every arrow, every move, every heartbeat mattered, and the duel continued. A breathtaking, dangerous dance that neither would forget. The duel stretched on under the scorching desert sun, each movement of horse and rider precise and measured. Cole could feel the sweat soaking his shirt, the heat baking his skin, but he refused to give in to exhaustion. Every nerve in his body was alive, every sense focused on the masked figure that seemed almost impossible to read. Arrows flew, dust kicked up, hooves pounded the rocky ground, and the canyon echoed with the sounds of their dangerous dance. Cole had faced many challenges in his life, but nothing like this. The skill, courage, and focus of this opponent were unlike anything he had ever encountered. Cole's horse stumbled slightly over a loose stone, and he leaned forward to steady it. The masked rider took the opportunity to gain ground, drawing another arrow with fluid motion. Cole's eyes tracked the movement carefully, his mind racing to anticipate the next strike. He felt the intensity of the moment tighten around him like a noose. The air seemed to thrum with energy, every sound and motion magnified in the heat of the duel. Cole knew that a single mistake could change everything, but he also knew that hesitation could be just as dangerous. Then it happened. In a split second, Cole lunged forward with his horse, attempting a maneuver he had practiced countless times but never under such pressure. The masked rider reacted instantly, twisting the body and drawing an arrow to counter. For a heartbeat, they were in perfect opposition, a mirror of skill and reflex. Then, as Cole's hand knocked the mask from the rider's face in the struggle, time seemed to slow. Cole froze. The mask clattered to the dusty ground, revealing a face beneath that he had not expected. It was not a man, not a bandit, not a typical threat from the plains. It was a woman. Her eyes met his, wide and fierce but also filled with the kind of strength and determination that could only come from years of survival in a harsh and unforgiving land. Cole felt a rush of surprise, awe, and a sudden shift in the tension around him. The fight he had been fully committed to just moments ago now felt different, complicated by a truth he had not anticipated. For a few seconds, they both sat frozen, the dust swirling around them, the horses stamping nervously, the heat pressing down. Cole's heart pounded, not with fear this time, but with something heavier, a mix of curiosity, respect, and disbelief. The woman's face was streaked with dust and sweat, her hair tangled and wild from the wind, but her expression was unyielding. She did not lower her gaze or flinch. Instead, she met his stare with a calm intensity that made Cole realize that she was not just a fighter. She was a protector, someone who had earned every ounce of the skill he had just witnessed. Cole slowly eased his hand from his revolver, the weight of it suddenly seeming less important. The woman's bow was still in her hand, but she made no move to attack. She simply held it loosely, the tip of the arrow pointing to the ground. There was no aggression in her stance, only readiness, a quiet alertness that spoke of years spent navigating danger. Cole's mind raced, trying to understand who she was, why she had been fighting, and what her presence here meant. His instincts told him to be cautious, but another part of him recognized something more profound. This was not a battle for conquest or revenge. This was a battle for survival and respect. The canyon seemed to hold its breath. The wind stilled for a moment as if acknowledging the change. Cole studied her face, noting the faint scars and the intensity in her eyes. He could see the story of her life etched in those features. The battles fought, the nights spent under the stars with only determination and courage as companions, the endless hours of riding through harsh terrain. He realized that she had survived where others might have faltered, that she had faced danger in a way that only the strongest could endure. And now here she was standing across from him, a formidable presence that commanded not just his attention, but his respect. Cole's horse shifted, sensing the change in tension, and he gave a gentle nudge to keep it calm. The woman mirrored his movement slightly, adjusting her posture on the horse, but she did not advance or retreat. They were both warriors, each with experience and skill, each with a deep understanding of the land and the threats that came with it. Yet there was no hostility in her eyes now, only a measured watchfulness. Cole felt a strange sense of relief, tempered by continued caution. He knew better than to underestimate anyone, especially someone who had demonstrated such mastery over horse weapon and terrain. "Why are you out here?" Cole finally asked, his voice low but steady. He did not want to startle her, but he needed answers. His heart still raced from the duel, but curiosity had begun to replace the immediate rush of fear. The woman's eyes flicked toward him, and she gave a slight nod. Her voice when she spoke was quiet but strong, carrying a weight of experience and authority. "I protect my people. I protect my home. That is all you need to know." The words were simple, but the tone conveyed layers of meaning, the kind that spoke of responsibility, sacrifice, and survival. Cole nodded slowly, absorbing the truth in her words. He had faced many threats in his life, many dangers, but this encounter felt different. There was no malice here, no reckless aggression. This was a confrontation born from necessity, skill, and courage. He respected that even as he remained alert, aware that the situation could shift at any moment. The woman did not lower her bow entirely, a reminder that she was still ready, still capable, still dangerous if provoked. For a few moments, they simply regarded each other, two figures locked in a silent understanding. The heat of the sun, the smell of dust and sweat, the echo of hooves and arrows, all of it seemed to fade into the background as they measured each other, recognizing the strength and determination in one another. Cole felt a sense of connection, a recognition that bravery and skill transcended appearances, gender, or assumptions. He had assumed he knew who his opponent would be, only to discover that courage and mastery could take many forms. The woman's gaze softened slightly, but there was still fire in her eyes. Cole could see the weight of responsibility she carried, the stories of her life written in subtle expressions and posture. He realized that she had faced more dangers than most, and that the duel they had engaged in was not simply a contest of strength, but a meeting of equals in terms of skill, resolve, and endurance. Cole's respect deepened and a sense of humility settled over him. He had been challenged, not just physically but mentally, emotionally and spiritually, by someone he had not expected. Cole took a slow, steadying breath, letting the dust settle and his racing heart calm slightly. He eased back in the saddle, signaling to his horse to relax. The woman did the same, a mutual acknowledgement that the immediate conflict had shifted. They were no longer adversaries in a battle of survival alone, but participants in a moment of understanding, a recognition of shared experience and capability. Cole felt a rare sense of clarity, a feeling that this encounter would remain with him far beyond the desert and the canyon. The wind picked up again, stirring dust around them and carrying the faint scent of sage and dry earth. Cole watched her carefully, noting the strength and grace in her movements, the way she handled her horse with ease and confidence. He realized that her presence here was not a threat to be neutralized, but a force to be acknowledged and respected. This was a woman who had honed her skills through necessity, who had lived in a harsh world and emerged capable, resilient, and formidable. He felt admiration, tempered by caution, and a renewed understanding of the nature of courage and survival. Cole finally spoke again, his voice calm, carrying a tone of respect. "I see why you fight. I see the skill, the courage. You're not just surviving. You're protecting what matters." The words were simple but sincere, and he could see a flicker of acknowledgement in her eyes. She did not smile, but the tension around her eyes eased slightly, a subtle recognition that her efforts were understood. The sun climbed higher, casting sharper shadows across the canyon floor, and Cole knew that the encounter could not last forever. Both of them had limits, and the heat, the exertion, and the intensity of the duel would eventually demand a pause. Yet for now they remained still, studying each other, two warriors who had tested one another and emerged with a new understanding. Cole felt a sense of peace in the midst of the exhaustion, a rare clarity brought by recognition of skill, bravery, and purpose. He glanced at the mask lying in the dust, a reminder of the moment of revelation that had changed everything. The duel had begun as a battle of survival and skill, but it had become something more. It had become a lesson in understanding, respect, and the unexpected truths hidden beneath appearances. Cole knew that this encounter would stay with him, shaping the way he viewed strength, courage, and the people around him. Cole eased his horse closer, keeping his movements deliberate and non-threatening. The woman did not flinch or draw her bow further, and he felt a cautious trust building in that small, unspoken space. They were no longer enemies, not entirely, though caution remained. There was a moment of shared understanding, a silent agreement that the confrontation had reached a new stage. The canyon, once a battlefield, had become a place of recognition, a meeting of equals who had tested each other and found mutual respect. For a long while they simply regarded one another, the air heavy with heat and dust, the sun blazing above, and the quiet rhythm of horses and wind filling the space between them. Cole felt his mind slow, the adrenaline giving way to reflection and awareness. He had been tested, challenged, and surprised in ways he had not anticipated. The duel had shifted from conflict to comprehension, from fear to respect, and from opposition to acknowledgement of shared humanity and skill. As the day pressed on, Cole realized that this encounter was only the beginning. There were questions yet to be answered, trust to be built, and understanding to deepen. The woman remained alert, ready if necessary, but the immediate tension had transformed into something more nuanced, something that required observation, patience, and thoughtful engagement. Cole felt a sense of responsibility, knowing that how he reacted next would shape the remainder of their encounter and the story that would unfold from it. Cole sat a short distance away from the woman, his horse pawing at the dusty ground as he caught his breath. The intensity of the duel was fading, replaced by a quiet stillness that hung over the canyon. He studied her carefully, noting the strength in her posture and the calm focus in her eyes. There was no longer an immediate threat, yet both remained cautious, aware that the desert could be unpredictable, and instincts honed over years of survival could not be turned off entirely. Cole lowered his revolver slightly, resting it on his thigh, but he did not completely let go. Trust was earned in the wild, and while he sensed that the woman was not here to harm him further, he remained vigilant. He could feel the tension in the air, a quiet dialogue of observation and patience. The woman's bow rested loosely in her hands, the arrow tip still sharp but no longer directed at him. She studied him as well, noting his movements, his posture, and the careful control he maintained over his horse. In that shared silence, they both understood the other's skill and caution. "Why did you come out here alone?" Cole asked finally, his voice low, steady, and calm. He wanted to understand, to make sense of the duel and the unusual circumstances that had brought them together. The heat of the sun and the rhythm of the canyon made the question feel heavier than just words. It carried the weight of curiosity and concern. The woman's eyes flicked toward him, then back to the distant cliffs. Her voice was quiet, measured, but there was a firmness to it that spoke of authority and experience. "My people live beyond those cliffs. Settlers and others have been moving closer. I ride to watch, to protect them if danger comes. That is all I do. That is all I know." She paused, and her eyes softened slightly, though the fire of determination remained. "I will not harm you unless I must." Cole nodded slowly, processing her words. He could see the honesty in her expression, the way her eyes did not waver, and the steadiness in her voice. She was telling the truth, and he felt a cautious respect grow. He understood what it meant to protect a place, to safeguard those who could not defend themselves. His life as a cowboy had taught him similar lessons, though not with the same intensity or danger. He realized that her courage and skill were shaped by necessity, survival, and a fierce sense of duty. "I understand," Cole said, his tone calm and deliberate. "I know what it's like to protect what's yours. You've done well to stay alive out here." His words were simple but sincere. He could feel the shift in the tension, a subtle easing that did not erase caution but replaced immediate fear with recognition and a tentative connection. The woman's eyes lingered on him, acknowledging his words, though she remained still and alert. Cole looked around at the canyon, noting the rocks, the dust, and the sparse vegetation that clung to life in the heat. The landscape itself was harsh and unforgiving, and he could see how it had shaped both him and the woman into skilled survivors. He felt a deep respect for the life she had carved out in such a challenging environment, and he understood that the duel they had just fought was a meeting of equals, a test of skill and endurance rather than personal animosity. "Where are your people?" Cole asked gently, sensing that learning more could help him understand her perspective. He did not want to press too hard, but curiosity and respect drove the question. He wanted to see the world through her eyes, to appreciate the challenges and responsibilities that guided her every decision. "They are in the canyon beyond the ridges," she said quietly. "I ride the edges to watch. I cannot let anyone threaten them, not even the unknown." Her words were simple, yet they carried a depth of meaning. Cole could feel the gravity of her duty, the weight she carried alone. She had faced danger repeatedly, relying on skill, courage, and keen instincts to survive and to protect others. He could see why she moved with such precision and calm control, and why she had been such a formidable opponent in the duel. Cole shifted slightly in the saddle, trying to find a comfortable position while remaining alert. He could feel the horse's muscles under him, taut and responsive, and he gave it a gentle pat to keep it calm. The woman did the same, mirroring his calm movements while maintaining readiness. They were both skilled riders, both experienced in reading animals, terrain, and the subtle signs of danger. In that quiet exchange, a mutual understanding formed, an unspoken acknowledgement of shared experience and respect. "I didn't know it would be a fight," Cole said softly. "I thought it might be someone else, maybe a threat I could handle easily. But you're not what I expected." His voice carried surprise, admiration, and a hint of humility. He had faced many dangerous people, but the woman's skill and courage had caught him completely off guard. Her mastery of horse bow and strategy had tested him in ways he had not anticipated, and he could not help but respect her for it. She met his gaze steadily, her expression unreadable for a moment. Then she gave a slight nod, a gesture that acknowledged both the challenge and the recognition. "You fought well," she said. "You are strong, careful, and quick. That is why I did not push further. I can see when someone is equal, and I knew that a fight beyond what was necessary would not be worth it." Her words were simple, yet they carried meaning, a recognition of skill and judgment that Cole felt deeply. He understood that she had made a conscious choice, not out of fear, but out of wisdom and assessment. Cole felt a sense of relief, mixed with respect. The duel had been intense, thrilling, and exhausting, but it had revealed something unexpected. Courage, skill, and the human drive to protect what matters could appear in forms he had not anticipated. The woman was not an enemy to defeat, but a person to understand. A reflection of the strength required to survive and safeguard others in a harsh, unforgiving world. The canyon remained quiet, the heat pressing down, the dust settling around them. Cole felt the exhaustion in his muscles, the ache in his arms, and the racing of his heart beginning to slow. The woman's calm focus was steady, a contrast to the adrenaline that still pulsed through him. He realized that she had faced challenges far beyond what most people could endure, and he felt a growing respect and curiosity about her life and the world she protected. "I would like to see where your people live," Cole said carefully. "If it's safe, I want to understand. Not to interfere, just to see, to learn." He chose his words with care, aware of the delicate balance between trust and caution. The woman considered his request, her eyes studying him, weighing intent and sincerity. Finally, she gave a small nod, the first sign of tentative agreement. "You may see, but you ride with caution. One wrong move could bring danger to both of us. Do not test me or my people." Cole nodded slowly, understanding the weight of her warning. He did not respond verbally, but the gesture conveyed his respect and acknowledgement. He adjusted his position in the saddle, signaling to the horse to follow her lead. The woman turned, and her horse moved smoothly over the rocky terrain, the bow still in hand but relaxed. Cole followed, careful to match her pace and movements, attuned to the subtle shifts in the canyon and the signs of potential threats. As they rode, Cole noticed the subtle ways she navigated the landscape, the way she guided her horse around loose stones, the attention to wind direction, the constant scanning for danger. Every detail spoke of experience, awareness, and survival instinct. Cole admired the skill and care with which she moved, realizing that this was more than just a journey to her people. It was a living demonstration of respect for the land, the animals, and the fragile balance of safety in a world full of unpredictability. They moved in silence for a while, the rhythm of hooves on rocks and dirt creating a quiet harmony. Cole's mind replayed the duel, the unexpected reveal of her identity, and the careful negotiation of understanding that followed. He realized that the experience had taught him much about patience, respect, and the courage to recognize skill and strength where he had not expected it. The woman had tested him, challenged him, and ultimately shown him a glimpse of the world she protected with unwavering determination. Cole finally broke the silence with another question, soft and respectful. "Do your people know you ride alone like this?" She glanced briefly over her shoulder, her expression guarded but steady. "They know I watch. They rely on me. They understand the risks. I do what is needed. That is enough." Her words were firm, conveying both responsibility and independence. Cole sensed that she carried the weight of duty willingly, guided by principle and necessity rather than desire for recognition or approval. He felt a deep admiration for the life she had chosen and the sacrifices she had made to protect others. They continued riding through the canyon, the terrain growing more rugged and challenging. Cole matched her movements carefully, learning from her skill and observation. The canyon seemed to shift around them, revealing hidden paths, narrow passes, and subtle changes in elevation that could hide danger or provide advantage. The woman moved with confidence, her experience evident in every decision, every adjustment, every careful navigation of the land. Cole felt both humbled and inspired, recognizing the level of mastery required to move with such precision and awareness in an unforgiving environment. Finally, after a long ride, they reached a point where the canyon opened into a wider valley. Cole could see signs of habitation, small structures, smoke rising from a distant fire, and faint figures moving with purpose and care. The woman slowed, signaling him to do the same, and they approached cautiously, aware that visibility and control were crucial. Cole felt a mix of curiosity, respect, and nervous anticipation. This was the world she protected, the place that shaped her skills, courage, and sense of duty. The woman's eyes softened slightly, though the alertness remained. "This is where they live," she said quietly. "Do not speak or act without understanding. Watch and learn. Respect is the key." Cole nodded, understanding the depth of her guidance. He realized that this moment was a rare privilege, a chance to see the world from her perspective, to appreciate the life, courage, and determination that shaped her every action. He felt gratitude and a renewed sense of responsibility, knowing that he had been welcomed into a world he could never take for granted. Cole followed the woman carefully, moving slowly through the valley as the signs of life became clearer. Small structures made from wood and stone dotted the landscape, and smoke curled gently from a distant fire, blending with the haze of the heat. Figures moved in the distance, tending to daily tasks, their presence peaceful yet purposeful. Cole felt a mixture of awe and humility as he realized that the woman's skill and determination had allowed her people to thrive in such a challenging environment. He understood that her life had been shaped by countless dangers and decisions, and that the survival of her people depended on her courage and wisdom. The woman guided her horse with ease, weaving between paths and avoiding obstacles with practiced precision. Cole followed, careful to match her pace, respecting the lessons in silence she offered through her movements. The tension that had defined their earlier encounter had transformed into something quieter, but no less significant. It was a tension of mutual respect, a careful balance of observation, patience, and understanding. Cole felt a deep sense of gratitude for the opportunity to witness the life she protected, the world she had shaped with her strength and skill. As they neared the central part of the settlement, Cole noticed children playing under the shade of a few hardy trees, their laughter carrying faintly on the warm wind. He felt a pang of admiration for the woman, knowing that she had risked so much to protect these innocent lives. Every decision she had made, every duel she had fought, had been in service of safeguarding the future for people who depended on her vigilance and strength. Cole felt a profound respect for her, not just as a warrior but as a guardian, someone whose courage extended beyond herself and touched the lives of others in a tangible, meaningful way. The woman's eyes flicked toward him briefly, and he understood that her trust was measured and cautious. Given the harshness of the world she navigated, she led him to a small area where the smoke from cooking fires rose steadily, and a few adults worked with quiet focus. Cole observed their movements, noting the efficiency and care with which they handled tasks essential to survival in the desert. It was a world built on resilience, cooperation, and vigilance, and he felt honored to witness it. The woman's presence among them was commanding yet understated. She was a protector, a guide, and an example of skill honed through necessity. Cole dismounted slowly, letting his horse graze while he surveyed the scene. The heat pressed down, but the sense of calm within the settlement contrasted with the harshness of the canyon outside. He could see the rhythm of life here, the careful balance of work, protection, and cooperation. Every gesture, every movement, spoke of experience and responsibility. Cole felt both admiration and humility, recognizing that the woman's actions had allowed this place to exist, safe from threats that he could only imagine. She guided him closer to one of the central structures, where she finally spoke, her voice quiet but clear. "You may see, but remember your place. Respect what you do not know and do not act without thought. These people depend on caution and wisdom, not carelessness." Cole nodded, understanding the weight of her instructions. He had learned in the duel that patience, respect, and observation were as important as skill and courage. Here, he saw those principles applied to life itself, in a community that thrived because of vigilance and careful action. Cole approached slowly, careful to avoid startling anyone. The woman moved ahead with calm authority, her presence commanding attention yet blending seamlessly with the environment. He noted the subtle ways she communicated with the others, gestures, glances, and posture that conveyed instructions and reassured her people without words. Cole realized that leadership here was quiet, consistent, and rooted in trust and respect earned over years of shared experience. He felt a profound understanding that this woman's life was not just about fighting or dueling, but about sustaining a fragile balance that others relied on completely. As he moved through the settlement, Cole's mind reflected on the events that had led him here. The duel, the revelation of her identity, the cautious understanding. They had all been lessons in courage, skill, and perspective. He thought of the moments when adrenaline and fear had been replaced by admiration and respect, and he realized that the experience had changed him. He had faced danger, yes, but he had also encountered a depth of humanity and purpose that left a lasting impression. The woman had taught him, without words, that true courage often exists quietly, protecting, guiding, and sustaining life rather than seeking glory or recognition. Cole finally stopped a short distance from the woman, who now turned to him fully, her bow resting across the horse's saddle. She studied him carefully, evaluating his understanding, his demeanor, and his respect for the world she protected. He met her gaze steadily, silently acknowledging the lessons he had learned and the respect he felt for her skill, courage, and dedication. The sun glinted off the edges of her helmet, now resting beside her, and he could see the weariness beneath the strength, the weight of responsibility carried with quiet dignity. "I see why you do this," Cole said quietly, his voice carrying sincerity and awe. "I understand now. You protect them and you survive to make sure this place stays safe. It's not about fighting for yourself, it's about everyone here." She nodded slightly, a small gesture of acknowledgement, though her eyes remained watchful. "Yes, that is all. Life is harsh and the desert is unforgiving. We cannot rely on others to protect us. I do what I must, and those who depend on me can live another day because of it." Her words were simple, but each carried weight. Cole could feel the depth of experience and commitment in her voice, the sense of responsibility that had shaped every decision she had made. He felt gratitude, respect, and a quiet admiration for the life she had chosen, and the courage required to live it. Cole glanced at the small figures in the settlement, tending fires, carrying water, or moving supplies with practiced care. He realized that the woman's presence had created a space where life could continue despite the harshness of the land. Every action, every decision, every careful choice had contributed to this moment, allowing a community to survive where survival was never guaranteed. He understood now that her skill extended far beyond the duel. They had been a test, a reflection of the mastery required to navigate life in a place where danger and responsibility were constant companions. Time passed slowly, the sun climbing higher and the heat pressing down, yet the rhythm of the settlement persisted. Cole felt a sense of peace and clarity as he observed the woman guiding, protecting, and watching over her people. He reflected on the lessons of the duel, the revelation of her identity, and the journey that had brought him here. Courage was not always loud, skill was not always aggressive, and strength was not always about domination. Here, courage, skill, and strength were tools of protection, resilience, and survival. He had witnessed the truth of that, and it would remain with him long after he left the valley. The woman finally spoke again, her voice calm and firm. "You may stay a short while, but remember, this is not your world. Watch and learn, respect, and do not interfere. Understanding comes before action." Cole nodded, appreciating the trust she had shown by allowing him into this space. He settled nearby, observing quietly, noting the careful movements of the people, the efficiency and care in their work, and the way the woman remained vigilant, ever aware, yet never overbearing. He felt the weight of observation, the responsibility to learn without judgment, and the quiet satisfaction of witnessing life carried forward through skill, courage, and determination. Cole's thoughts wandered to the duel, the moment the mask had fallen, and the revelation of her identity. He understood now that the fight had been more than a test of physical skill. It had been a measure of character, patience, and understanding. He had faced danger, yes, but he had also faced a lesson in humility, respect, and the human capacity to protect, endure, and persevere. The woman had shown him the strength of responsibility, the courage of protection, and the quiet power of mastery over both skill and life. As the day moved toward evening, Cole realized it was time to leave. He had learned what he had come to see, gained the understanding he sought, and felt a deep sense of respect for the woman and her people. He mounted his horse carefully, feeling the familiar weight and motion, yet carrying with him the lessons, reflections, and admiration that had grown through this encounter. The woman watched silently, her posture relaxed but alert, acknowledging the departure without words. The trust and understanding established in the canyon now extended to this moment, a quiet recognition that their paths had crossed for a reason. Cole turned to face the open canyon beyond, feeling the wind on his face and the warmth of the sun fading toward evening. He took one last look at the settlement, the woman standing as a guardian and protector, and felt a sense of gratitude and respect that went beyond words. The experience had tested him, challenged him, and transformed his understanding of courage, skill, and human determination. He knew he would carry this memory, these lessons, and this respect with him for the rest of his life. As he rode back toward the cliffs and open plains, Cole felt the weight of the duel, the revelation, and the journey shift into a quiet, lasting presence in his mind. He reflected on the woman's strength, the lives she protected, and the wisdom she had imparted without speaking loudly or seeking recognition. The desert stretched endlessly ahead, unforgiving and vast. Yet he felt a renewed sense of purpose, respect, and understanding for the courage and skill that lived quietly among those who had to survive and protect. The canyon behind him seemed smaller now, yet the lessons of the day loomed large in his mind. He understood the depth of responsibility, the necessity of courage, and the quiet power of human skill and determination. He had faced a warrior, discovered her identity, and witnessed a life devoted to protection and resilience. The story of that encounter would remain with him, a lasting reminder of the strength, courage, and humanity that could exist in even the harshest of lands. As Cole rode into the fading light, he felt a sense of closure mixed with reflection. The duel, the revelation, the journey through the canyon, and the glimpse into the woman's life had all shaped him in ways he could not have anticipated. He carried with him not only the memory of a formidable opponent, but the understanding of courage, responsibility, and the quiet power of protecting what truly matters. The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the desert, and Cole rode on, changed forever by the encounter and the life he had been allowed to witness.